Alexei had always believed that the quietest moments in life were the most revealing. He used to tell this to people, colleagues, friends, anyone who ever wondered how he could remain so composed in a world that often seemed intent on speeding past him. He liked slow mornings, warm coffee, the sound of pages turning. And he loved Marina deeply, sincerely, and perhaps too blindly. They had been together for 7 years, married for 5. She was brilliant, ambitious, and dazzling in a way that made the world turn its head. He was calm, steady, the kind of man who never forgot birthdays or to water the plants on Sunday mornings. Their differences once felt complementary, like two voices blending into a harmony neither could create alone. But harmony has a way of cracking quietly. It began with something small. Marina was more distant, subtle, almost imperceptible but noticeable to someone who had memorized her rhythms. She laughed less at his jokes. She answered messages more slowly. She started taking extra freelance design projects, staying late at her studio. He trusted her, of course he did, but a strange pressure settled in his chest. A vague intuition. The kind people try to brush off but always return to. One Thursday evening, he decided to drop by her studio, bringing her favorite lavender tea. It had always been a sweet surprise in the early years of their marriage, something intimate and romantic, something that reminded them who they were together. He didn't intend to spy. He didn't even knock quietly. He simply walked the same way he always did, carrying warmth in a paper cup. But that night warmth turned cold. The studio lights were dimmed except for the glow of a single desk lamp. Marina's coat was draped over a chair. Her bag, her sketch pads, her perfume lingered in the air. But she wasn't alone. Alexei heard voices, hushed, intimate, too close. A man's voice. A soft laugh that he recognized but hadn't heard from her in months. He froze, the cup trembling slightly in his hand. He didn't push the door further. He didn't need to. The world inside him already began falling apart. He didn't hear every word, just enough. "You shouldn't come so often," Marina whispered. "I can't help it," the man murmured, "when you look at me like that." There was a brief silence, one that said more than words could. Alexei closed the door quietly, almost politely, and stepped back into the hallway, the warm tea now cooling rapidly in the winter air. He didn't confront them, not then. He walked to the street, leaning against a chilled brick wall, staring at his reflection in a shop window. His face looked pale, shocked, as though it belonged to someone else. He kept imagining that there must be an explanation, some misunderstanding, some innocent implication twisted by bad timing. But part of him, the part he relied on most, the part that always felt the truth beneath surfaces, knew that the explanation he wanted didn't exist. The tea slipped from his hand, rolling onto the pavement. He didn't pick it up. That night Alexei didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, the apartment dark except for the soft glow of the refrigerator light whenever he opened it just to close it again. A pointless gesture, but one that kept his hands busy. He replayed the moment over and over, the voices, the tone, the silence. When Marina came home just after midnight, smelling faintly of a perfume she wore only for special occasions, he pretended to be asleep on the couch. She paused for a moment, watching him. He heard her sigh, tired, distant, before she quietly walked to the bedroom and closed the door. He waited until the lock clicked before opening his eyes. Over the next few days, he moved through life with slow, deliberate steps, careful not to reveal what he knew. He wasn't ready to explode or accuse or demand answers. He needed to understand, to see if she would confess, to give fate a chance to correct itself. But Marina didn't change. She remained distant, buried in her phone, texting someone with the faintest hint of a smile she no longer showed him. She worked more late nights. She avoided his gaze at dinner. One evening, as he washed dishes, he spoke gently, almost hopping. The softness of his tone would invite honesty. "Everything okay, Marinka? You seem far away lately." She frowned slightly. Just tired, work been insane. He nodded. You know you can talk to me, right? She hesitated, just enough for his stomach to twist. Of course, she said finally, brushing past him. Don't overthink things. But he already had. Alexei had always been a rational man. He believed in evidence, in patterns, in the subtle truths that linger in behavior. And it wasn't long before he noticed more signs, messages she hid when he entered the room, sudden showers before bed, phone calls on the balcony in winter weather she normally hated. His heart broke slowly, piece by piece. He didn't tell anyone, not his friends, not his parents. Pain, he believed, became heavier when spoken aloud. For now, he carried it alone. But emotions, when held too tightly, eventually spill. One afternoon, while Marina was out at the studio, he sat on the edge of their bed, looking at the framed pictures on the dresser, vacations, anniversaries, silly moments captured on film. It felt like looking at a life he once lived but no longer belonged to. And then something inside him shifted. Not anger, not spite, something clearer, sharper, a realization. If she had already chosen someone else, then this was not about whether he deserved better. It was about whether he would let this betrayal define him. He stood up slowly. Alexei understood one thing. Marina had taken something from him: trust, stability, love he had given freely. But she hadn't taken the one thing she never believed he possessed: control. He would not lash out. He would not beg or crumble or become a shadow of himself. He would rise, quietly, gracefully, and brilliantly. He would let her unravel by the weight of her own choices. And when the time came, she would understand exactly what she lost. But first he had to gather himself, to heal, to think, to prepare. Revenge, if done without cruelty, could be an art form. A symphony of subtlety, timing, and truth. And Alexei, calm and meticulous by nature, was capable of conducting it beautifully. He just never imagined he'd have to. In the days that followed, Alexei found himself waking earlier than usual. Before dawn, before the city stirred. It was easier to think in the quiet, easier to breathe. He would sit by the window with a cup of black tea, watching the pale light creep across the sky, painting the buildings in soft silver. It was a kind of ritual, one that steadied him when everything else felt painfully uncertain. Marina continued moving through their home like a visitor who had overstayed but pretended not to notice. Her smiles were fleeting. Her attention flickered like a candle in the wind. And every evening when she said she had work to finish, Alexei's chest tightened, though his face remained unchanged. He wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. He needed clarity, purpose, a plan that didn't stem from anger but from understanding. One early Monday morning, he reached out to a friend he hadn't spoken to in months, Irina, a colleague from his years at an advertising agency. She was sharp, perceptive, and one of the few people he trusted with delicate truths. They met at a small cafe tucked between old brick buildings, a place the two of them had once visited during brainstorming breaks. Irina arrived with her usual energy, brushing snow from her coat. She greeted him with a warm hug and a slight tilt of her head, the kind that said she knew something was wrong long before he confirmed it. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said gently, settling into the chair across from him. Alexei offered a tired smile. "That obvious? To someone who knows you completely." He didn't tell her everything. He didn't need to. Just a brief, quiet description of what he had heard at Marina's studio. Irina listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to frustration, then softening into something like empathy. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't deserve that, not in any universe." Alexei nodded, tracing the rim of his cup. I want to handle this right. I don't want to destroy her. I don't want to become someone I'm not." Irina leaned forward. "Then don't. But that doesn't mean you should let her walk over you. You're allowed to reclaim your dignity." He exhaled slowly, What would you do? Me, she smirked playfully. I'd throw her clothes out the window and change the locks, but you're not me. Her smirk faded. You've always been deliberate. You don't lash out. Whatever you decide, it'll be something thoughtful. Something thoughtful. The phrase echoed in his mind, long after they parted ways. That evening when Alexei returned home, Marina was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up when he entered, didn't ask how his day was, didn't offer a smile. The space between them felt wider than ever, an invisible chasm neither acknowledged. He watched her for a moment, taking in her posture, the slight curl of her lips as she read something on the screen, something that wasn't from him. It struck him then how little she seemed to realize what she was losing, how blind she had become to the man sitting just behind her. When she finally glanced up, she offered a faint, distracted smile. "You're home early." "Traffic was light," he replied softly. She nodded, returning to her phone. And just like that, the moment melted into silence. Over the next week, Alexei began observing, not spying, not confronting, just watching, studying her habits the way he once studied market trends and behavioral patterns. She was unknowingly revealing everything he needed to know. Her weakness wasn't guilt. It wasn't even the other man. It was her vanity. Marina cared deeply about her image, her reputation among friends, colleagues, social circles. She took pride in being admired, respected, seen as successful and impeccable. Anything that threatened that illusion shook her. Alexei remembered countless moments where she panicked over minor criticisms or spiraled when someone outshined her. He didn't want to ruin her, but he could let her ruin herself. And he would do it with finesse. His first step was subtle. He stopped initiating conversations, stopped inviting her to dinner, stopped offering help or affection. But he did not withdraw in bitterness. He became neutral, polite, distant, composed. Marina noticed. She didn't say anything at first, but she noticed. One evening, as Alexei prepared a simple dinner for himself, pasta, olive oil, nothing more, Marina entered the kitchen, leaning against the doorway. "You didn't cook for both of us?" she asked, her tone oddly sharp. He turned calmly. "You've been busy. I assumed you already ate." She blinked, thrown off. "Well, I haven't." He shrugged gently. "There's more pasta in the cupboard." Then he sat down and began eating. It was subtle, almost trivial. But the expression on her face, the faint flash of confusion, maybe even irritation, told him that the shift had registered. The second step was even gentler but far more effective. Alexei began improving himself. He signed up for a fitness program at a quiet neighborhood gym. He started reading again, books he once loved but had abandoned for the sake of their marriage's constant busyness. He reconnected with old colleagues and acquaintances. He organized his workspace, updated his portfolio, refreshed his online presence. He reacquainted himself with the version of him that existed before he molded himself to accommodate Marina's world. Slowly, subtly, he became different. More confident, more centered, more alive. And Marina, though she never commented directly, found herself watching him more often. One morning, as he buttoned a crisp new shirt for work, she leaned against the dresser, arms crossed. "You're dressing up lately," she said, trying to sound casual. He smiled faintly. "I have important meetings coming up." "You never mentioned them. You never asked." Her jaw tightened, not in anger but in surprise. She had grown used to him being predictable. Now her certainty was unraveling. And Alexei, calm, silent, let it. The third step was the most delicate. He began withdrawing emotionally, but with elegance. No cold shoulders. No harsh words. Just absence. When she spoke to him about her day, he listened politely but didn't engage. When she touched his arm lightly in passing, a habit of years, he didn't react with warmth or familiarity. When she suggested they might go out for dinner sometime this week, he simply answered, "We'll see." Not dismissive, not cruel, simply detached. And for the first time since her affair began, Marina showed signs of unease. Late at night, when she thought he was asleep, she would lie awake beside him, staring up at the ceiling. Her breathing would quicken slightly, a rhythm he recognized as anxiety. Her phone stayed untouched on the nightstand, an unusual sight. Alexei didn't say a word, but the moment everything started to shift for real came unexpectedly. It was a Saturday afternoon when Marina announced casually, "I might be working late tonight again." Alexei, who was reading quietly on the couch, looked up and asked, in a tone so steady it disarmed her, "Are you meeting him?" The silence that followed was louder than any shout. Marina froze, her lips parted slightly. Her eyes widened, not with guilt but with shock. What are you talking about?" she whispered. Alexei closed the book gently, marking his page. He was not angry, his voice was soft, almost serene, like a man discussing weather patterns. "I heard you at the studio weeks ago." Marina paled, breaking eye contact. "Alex, I can explain." "You don't have to." He stood slowly. "I already understand more than you think." Her eyes filled with panic, not only from being caught, but because he wasn't reacting the way she had expected. There was no rage, no accusations, just a quiet certainty. "Why didn't you say anything?" she breathed. "Because I wanted to see who you would choose," he replied. "And now I have." Marina stepped closer, voice trembling. "Please, Alexei, it's not what you think. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless." "A choice," he corrected gently. "It was a choice." She flinched. He didn't walk away. He simply moved past her toward the hallway, offering her one final, devastatingly calm truth. "And now I'm making mine." He didn't slam the door. He didn't raise his voice. But Marina stood frozen, hands trembling slightly, as though the foundation beneath her had shifted violently without warning. Alexei didn't leave the relationship that day, not physically, but emotionally, decisively, gracefully. He stepped out of it. And Marina felt the absence instantly, profoundly, in ways she had never anticipated. For the first time since her affair began, she wasn't in control. Alexei was. And his quiet, elegant revenge had only just begun. In the days after Alexei's quiet revelation, the atmosphere in their apartment changed so profoundly that even the walls seemed to listen. There was no shouting, no dramatic breakup, no sleepless arguments echoing through the night, nothing theatrical. Just distance. Precise, calculated, undeniable distance. Marina felt it like a draft coming from a door she hadn't realized was open. Alexei didn't avoid her. He simply wasn't there in the way he used to be. He moved with a calm purpose that made her feel strangely irrelevant. He no longer checked in with her, no longer asked about her day, no longer filled the space with warmth and subtle affection. He was polite, even kind, but in a way that felt more like a courteous stranger than a husband. And that, more than anything, unsettled her. On Tuesday morning, Marina watched him from the kitchen doorway as he made himself breakfast. He was dressed sharply, new blazer, hair neatly styled, posture more confident than she had seen in months. "Are you meeting someone important today?" she asked hesitantly. Alexei glanced at her with a faint, serene smile. "Yes." She swallowed, "Work-related." "In a way." His answer was evasive without being secretive. It unnerved her. Before she could question further, he picked up his keys and headed for the door. "Have a good day," he said, warm but distant. "You too," she whispered, but he was already gone. What Marina didn't know was that Alexei had begun investing in something far more valuable than revenge. Himself. He attended workshops, networking events, quiet gatherings of industry professionals. He revitalized his portfolio with fresh ideas and began pitching new concepts to creative firms. His reputation, long overshadowed by Marina's more flamboyant career, started to shine independently. People noticed, and he noticed that people noticed. It wasn't pride that fueled him, but clarity. For years, he had poured energy into supporting Marina's ambitions. He had been her anchor, her advisor, her steady foundation. But now, stepping onto a path shaped solely by his own intentions, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Freedom. And with freedom came strength. Meanwhile, Marina struggled with a growing unease she tried desperately to disguise. At work, she found herself distracted, her sketches lacking the usual vibrancy. Her coworkers commented on her sudden detachment. Even her supervisor, usually enthusiastic about her progress, pulled her aside one afternoon. "Everything okay, Marina? You seem off." She forced a smile. "Just overwhelmed, it'll pass." But it didn't. That night when she returned home, she found Alexei on the balcony, something he rarely used. He stood quietly, sipping tea, gazing at the city lights. There was something elegant about him in that moment, confident, contemplative, untouchable. She approached slowly. "Can we talk?" He turned his head but didn't step inside. "If you'd like." She hesitated before speaking. "I want to explain what happened at the studio." Alexei took a measured sip of tea. "You can." "It was a mistake," she rushed. "I was overwhelmed, confused, and he just showed attention at the wrong time. I don't know what I thought, but it meant nothing." Alexei's voice was soft, almost gentle. "If it meant nothing, why did it continue?" Her breath caught. "It didn't." He looked at her with eyes too calm to be deceived. Marina's voice cracked. "I'm trying, Alexei. I want to fix this." He nodded once. "Then fix yourself first." "Not us. Not this marriage. Yourself." The distinction hit her like a blow. He finished his tea, set the cup down, and walked inside. Marina stood alone on the balcony, trembling in the cold air. In the following days, Alexei's transformation accelerated. He wasn't cold, just centered, focused, unshakable. He spent evenings working on personal projects, refining ideas, building new opportunities. He spoke on panels, updated his professional presence, and received several invitations to interviews. Marina noticed all of it. She found herself staring at him from across the room, at how composed he looked, how self-assured, how quietly radiant. It made her stomach twist with something unfamiliar. Regret. Real regret. Not because she had been caught, but because she finally understood what she had broken. One Friday evening, Alexei arrived home later than usual. Marina sat waiting for him, hands clenched in her lap. She had prepared dinner, his favorite, something she hadn't done in months. He stepped in, removed his coat, and offered a polite smile. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yes," she said quickly. "I made dinner. I thought maybe we could eat together." Alexei paused, then nodded politely. "Thank you." They sat at the table in silence, an uncomfortable silence, the kind that once would have been filled with easy conversation. Marina pushed her food gently with her fork. "I miss how we used to be," she whispered. Alexei didn't look up. "People change." "Yes," she said softly, "but we can change together." He put down his fork and met her eyes with a calm, unwavering gaze. "Marina, you didn't choose we when it mattered." She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. He continued, "I'm not angry, truly, but things can't go back to what they were, not after this." "But I love you," she said desperately. Alexei's expression was almost kind. "Maybe, but you didn't honor that love." She began to cry quietly, not theatrically. just soft, helpless tears of someone realizing too late the magnitude of her actions. "I can do better," she whispered. "I promise I can." Alexei nodded slowly. "If that's true, you'll have to prove it, not to me." He stood, carrying his plate to the sink. "But to yourself." And then he walked into his study, closing the door gently behind him. Marina remained at the table long after he had gone, tears drying slowly on her cheeks, untouched food cooling in front of her. It was that night she finally understood. Alexei wasn't punishing her. He wasn't being cruel. He wasn't even trying to get back at her. He was rising. And his rise illuminated her downfall with more clarity than any confrontation ever could. Over the next week, Marina attempted to improve herself, waking earlier, working harder, trying to close the emotional distance. But no matter how much she tried, Alexei remained serene and untouchably composed. She tried talking to him. He listened politely. She tried reaching out with small gestures, coffee, kind words, and offered to join him at events. He accepted or declined with the same graceful neutrality. Marina felt like she was chasing a man made of smoke. And Alexei, he was becoming someone else, someone stronger, someone clearer, someone she no longer recognized and yet suddenly wanted more than ever. The irony stung. One evening, Marina found a printed email lying on the desk in the study, a confirmation from an important creative conference in Helsinki. Alexei had been invited as a keynote speaker. Her breath caught. She knew how prestigious the event was. She knew how many people dreamed of such a platform. She knew that this success, was something she had once wanted him to reach, but she never imagined he would do it while stepping away from her. When he entered the room, she held up the paper with trembling fingers. "You're speaking at the Svala conference?" she asked, her voice shaking with disbelief. He nodded, removing his coat. "They reached out last week." "Why didn't you tell me?" He paused, considering. "I wasn't sure you'd be interested." "I am," she said quickly. "Of course I am." Alexei offered a gentle, almost distant smile. "Thank you." And that was all. No excitement shared. No celebration. No embrace. Just polite acknowledgement. Marina felt something inside her collapse. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake watching the ceiling, feeling the weight of consequences she couldn't undo. Alexei slept peacefully beside her, breathing slow, steady, unbothered. His calmness felt like a mirror reflecting everything she had lost. Her thoughts spiraled. How did I let this happen? How did I choose someone else over the man who gave me everything? For the first time, she saw the truth not through fear or guilt, but through clarity. The man she betrayed wasn't weak. He was extraordinary. And she had only realized it when he stopped giving himself away. The next morning, Marina made a decision. She approached Alexei as he prepared for work, her voice steady but vulnerable. "If you're going to Helsinki, I'd like to come with you." Alexei looked at her for a long moment, eyes calm, unreadable. "That won't be possible," he said softly. Her face fell. "Why not?" "I've already arranged everything, and I need this trip to be mine." She understood, and it hurt more than any anger he could have shown. As he walked toward the door, she whispered, "Are we ending?" Alexei paused, hand on the handle. "No," he said gently, "not yet." "Then what are we?" He turned his head slightly, offering a truth that landed with quiet, devastating precision. "We're two people going in different directions. Whether we meet again depends on whether you choose to walk, not chase." And with that, he stepped out. Marina stood frozen, breath trembling, realizing that her fate was no longer in her control. Alexei had taken back the power she never realized he possessed. And soon, very soon, he would show her the final, elegant shape of his revenge. A revenge built not on destruction, but on transformation. Time has a strange way of moving when a heart is breaking. For Marina, the days after Alexei left for Helsinki stretched endlessly. Long, quiet hours filled with regret so thick it clung to her like fog. She tried to distract herself with work, with errands, with anything that pulled her attention away from the hollow ache inside her chest. But nothing worked. Every room in the apartment whispered his absence. Every chair he once sat in looked abandoned. Every mug felt wrong in her hands because it wasn't his. She wandered the living room late in the evenings, packing like a ghost haunting her own home. She replayed their past, not the betrayal, not the mistakes, but the tenderness, the laughter, the honest devotion he had given her so freely. She had been the center of his life, and she hadn't even noticed until the spotlight dimmed. Alexei's absence was more powerful than his presence had ever been. But this story was never about punishment. It was about transformation, his and eventually hers. Alexei sat by the window of the plane, watching as clouds drifted below him in an endless cotton sea. For the first time in years, he felt completely weightless. No tension in his shoulders, no heaviness in his lungs, no worry about what waited for him at home. He was flying not only to another country. He was flying into another version of himself. Helsinki greeted him with crisp air and muted sunlight, the kind that made everything appear clean and new. He checked into his hotel, reviewed his notes for the conference, and then simply breathed. A deep inhale, slow and steady, as though he were filling his chest with an entirely new life. The next morning, he stood backstage in a minimalist auditorium, adjusting his microphone as the host introduced him. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Alexei Volkov. Applause swells softly. As he stepped onto the stage, he felt a stillness, a perfect, calm clarity that made every word come naturally. He spoke about creative resilience, authenticity in storytelling, and the power of subtle narratives. He wasn't theatrical, he wasn't loud. Instead, he spoke with the same quiet confidence that had always defined him, but now people listened. Truly listened. When he finished, the applause was louder, warmer. Several attendees approached him afterward, designers, directors, even two CEOs. They praised his work, asked for his contact information, invited him to future collaborations. For the first time in his career, Alexei was seen fully, completely, unmistakably. Not as Marina's husband, but as himself. Marina sat alone on the couch, staring at Alexei's empty side of the bed. Days had passed without a message from him, not out of cruelty, but because he had mentally stepped onto a different path. She checked her phone obsessively, refreshing chats, waiting for any sign of him. But none came. She replayed every conversation they had before he left. His words echoed coldly, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. Whether we meet again depends on whether you choose to walk, not chase. She whispered the sentence to herself over and over. Walk, not chase. For years, she had been chasing external validation, admiration from coworkers, attention from strangers, pride from her social circle. And in doing so, she had neglected the only person who offered her something genuine. She finally understood. This wasn't about the affair anymore. It was about how she had stopped choosing him. Stopped choosing them. Stopped choosing love. And perhaps worst of all, she had stopped choosing herself. On the third night of his absence, Marina opened a drawer she had avoided for months, a drawer filled with items from their early years together. Postcards from trips, ticket stubs, handwritten notes, sketches he had made of her when she wasn't looking. She pressed one of the notes to her chest, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. It read, "The world feels calmer when you're near." She had taken that version of him for granted. And now she feared she might never get him back. When Alexei returned home 3 days later, Marina was sitting at the kitchen table, hands clasped tightly around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She looked up as he entered, eyes immediately swimming with relief and fear. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he replied softly, removing his coat. The air between them was tense, not with anger, but with unspoken truths hanging fragile and heavy. "How was the conference?" she asked, voice trembling. "Good," he said calmly. "Productive." She nodded, unable to maintain eye contact. "I'm glad." Silence settled again. Alexei walked past her into the living room. Marina followed slowly, unsure of what she was walking toward. "I realized something while you were gone," she said, voice barely audible. He waited. "I was chasing the wrong things: recognition, excitement, attention. I wanted to feel special." She exhaled shakily. "But I was already special to the one person who mattered most, and I didn't see it." Alexei watched her with a soft, quiet sadness. She stepped closer. "I hurt you, I know that, and I know that no apology can erase it, but I'm not asking you to forget what happened." She swallowed. "I'm asking if you'll let me show you that I can become someone worthy of the man you've grown into." Her words were sincere, fragile, trembling with vulnerability. Alexei didn't respond immediately. He walked to the window, looking out at the city lights flickering in the dusk. "You say you want to change," he said gently, "but change isn't a promise, it's a process." "I know," she whispered, "and I need to see it, not hear it." She nodded quickly, tears building again. "You will." He turned to her fully, his voice steady. "Marina, I don't know if we can return to what we once were. I don't even know if we should." Her breath caught painfully. "But I'm willing," he continued softly, "to see who we can become now." Tears fell freely down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. But Alex raised a hand gently, not to stop her but to offer clarity. "Understand something," he said. "My goal wasn't to punish you. I don't want revenge that wounds you. If anything, I wanted you to see." "See what?" she breathed. "That I won't collapse because you broke something." His voice grew quieter, deeper. "And that if you ever want to be with me again, it will be because you choose me out of strength, not comfort." Marina nodded, tears falling onto her hands. Her voice cracked. "I understand." In the weeks that followed, a delicate equilibrium formed. Alexei continued rising, receiving invitations from firms, collaborating on creative projects, meeting new people with ease and confidence. He was no longer the quiet man living in the shadow of a partner's ambition. He was building his own legacy. And Marina began walking. Truly walking. She started therapy, not because he asked her to, but because she wanted to understand the emptiness she had tried to fill with external attention. She cut ties with the man from the studio. She apologized to him, not out of guilt, but closure. She began rebuilding herself, her sense of worth, her inner compass, her definition of love. Alexei noticed the changes, not out of hope but something calmer, respect. Slowly they began having conversations again, real ones, small dinners, walks in the park, quiet evenings with long, reflective pauses. They were no longer who they had been before the betrayal. They were something new, uncertain but real, wounded but growing. One evening, months later, they stood on the same balcony where Alexei had once told her she needed to fix herself first. The sky was violet, the city hummed softly. Marina turned to him. "I don't expect anything," she said quietly, "but I want you to know I've changed, Alexei, truly." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression serene. No anger, no pride, no bitterness. "I can see that," he said. She took a shaky breath. "Do you think we'll ever?" Alexei finished for her, his voice warm for the first time in a long time. "Begin again." She nodded, eyes shining. He didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the city, the one that had witnessed their rise, fall, and quiet rebirth. Finally, with a gentle breath, he replied, "Maybe if we do, it will be different, honest, equal." Marina nodded slowly. "That's all I want." Alexei turned to her, his voice soft but resolute. "You lost me for a while, you needed to, and I needed to lose you to find myself. That was the real revenge. Not vengeance born of cruelty, but healing that forced truth to surface. Growth that made her feel the weight of her loss. Clarity that transformed both of them." He stepped closer, not touching her yet, but close enough that warmth passed between them. "Now," he whispered, "we can choose each other again, if it's truly a choice." Marina's breath trembled. "It is." The wind brushed gently past them, and for the first time since everything fell apart, Alexei allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. Their story didn't return to what it once was. It became something else. A testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the quiet power of dignity. A story not about betrayal, but about choosing who you become after the pieces break.